Hello everybody, I'm back with another video finally. Um, this one's going to be interesting because we're going to talk about a possible identity theft that happened. Who was the real Jesus? Yes, there's two. Jesus Barabbas, the son, and Barabbas meaning son of the Father, or Jesus Christ, the Anointed. This is a very interesting study, and I don't want you to take my word for it. I want you to look at the material and then decide for yourself. I know how I feel, but and what I think Father's revealing, but you have to decide for your own selves. I made this discovery some time back, but I wasn't sure what all to do with it or what it meant. So I just kind of put it on the back burner and kept looking at things and here and there until I decided what it really meant. Um, Matthew 27:16 through 17, in many of the manuscripts, this is how it reads. At that time they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah or the Christ?" Um, Barabbas' name appears as Bar-Abbas in the Greek text of the Gospels. It's derived ultimately from the Aramaic, which is Bar Abba, which means the son of the father. Some of the manuscripts have, for this verse, the full name of Barabbas as Jesus Barabbas. And that was probably the name that was originally written in there. And when I did some research on it, they think that the Jesus part was taken out of the other manuscripts because they didn't want to confuse Jesus with a murderer or a possible criminal or something like that, and that it would confuse people, which is crazy, but that's why they did it. And especially when you consider what he said in John 5:43, "I've come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, you will receive him." So we're going to explore what happened at the Pilate trial and who is this Jesus Barabbas really, and who is Jesus called the Christ. There's two of them. Now this is the interlineary, and I just wanted to show you that you can see here Jesus, the son of Abba, or Jesus, the anointed one, or this word actually is Christos right there in Greek. So you can see it's actually in the interlineary. And here's another one, just so you can see that it's actually in this word they didn't translate right there. That means the Barabbas, or son of the Father. And you've got Jesus before it. And then when you come down here, you've got Jesus again, who is called the Christ. So when you look up these interlinearies, you'll see that in there. And they oftentimes leave stuff blank, which they shouldn't. Even if it is different from what we're used to speaking, it should be in there. Because every word is important. The more I've studied the Greek, the more I realize that. And you're going to see that big time in this video. Now, this is the final warning for the end of the age in Matthew 24:20 24:5. Now, how many times do people go over Matthew 24? The fig tree, all this stuff. When the fig tree puts on leaves, and they talk about all these things. But when they ask about this, what was the first thing he said? Don't be deceived. And then this verse, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they will lead many astray. That's a pretty big thing, and we take it to mean that many are going to come calling themselves Christ. No, that's not what it says. Think about it, what it's really saying. This is where we have to kind of get out of that conditioning of what we've been taught versus what is really there. For many will come in my name, so they're coming in his name, saying, I am the Christ. Like, they're going to call me Christ, and they're going to lead people astray. And think about all these, like this Jesus Christ superstar, Jesus Christ this, Jesus Christ that, Jesus Christ this. There's a reason this happened, and I'm going to try to explain it. I hope I do a good job of it. Father, help me, because this is hard, and it's hard to accept, but you're going to see, I think you will see the truth in this video. I mean, I have prayed so hard about this one, and I have studied so hard. I just hope I do justice, in showing the truth. Here we go, the hard part. This verse would be the first one to pop in your mind when you're going, oh, you cannot say he's not Christ, because you'll be the denier and you're going to be an antichrist. Let's look at this verse of what's really in the interlineary. And it's like, who is the liar but he that denieth that Jesus is the Christ? He is the antichrist that denieth the Father and the Son. Okay, it sounds pretty easy, pretty simple, straightforward, until you go to the interlineary and you look at what's actually in the Greek. There's a word missing right here. There's not. And what does that tell us? Jesus, he is not the Christ. That's a big issue right there. It's like, it's a huge issue. All right, and then we have this word that. And when you look at this word hostis down here, it's, how many times is it because? And how many times is it that? It's mostly because. 212 times it is translated as because. Alright, or since. Now let's look at this sentence and read it like what we have in the interlineary, or the actual Greek, not what we have printed in our English translation. Who is the liar if not the denier? Because Jesus is not the Christ. This is the Antichrist, the denier of the Father and the Son. Pretty interesting. It's like, okay, right there we're being told that Jesus is not the Christ in that sentence. And we have always taken it that if you deny that he's the Christ, then you're the Antichrist. You're Antichrist spirit. But that's not what it says in the Greek. Okay, here's another one, and I just wanted to show you something on this slide too. Alright, this that I've got right here is from the King James Version Strong's number thing, where they give you the listing from the King James. Now look right here at G3756. You come over here to G3756, and that is that word not. What have they done to that? They left it off. Now why? Why did they leave it off? I think you're going to see why they left it off pretty soon. And they just left the word out. And you can see it up here. I swear I need glasses. There it is. 3756. There's your not. It's in there. But then when they go to translate and do the translation, it's gone. And they let you know it's gone by doing that. That's just crazy. I'm also going to show you here something very interesting that's in Matthew that I didn't notice before. And these things just kind of like flung off the page at me, so it's like I was thinking, this is something Father wanted me to look at, because when something just like, ooh, I never realized that before. When you're reading, it's like, oh, there's something there. There's two separate kingdoms. Because in Matthew 8:11 he says, I tell you, many will come from the east and the west, recline at the table with Abram, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into outer darkness. In that place there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And to the centurion, Jesus, go, let it be done for you as you have believed. And the servant was healed that very moment. So he's telling about there are two separate kingdoms. There's a kingdom in heaven, and then there's the kingdom here. So there's two separate worlds. Like I've told y'all before, it's like he said, I'm from above and you're from below. That's the two kingdoms. There's one above us, and then there's one down here. And we're from below. And he's our gate or our door to get to Father's world. And that's one reason this world is such a mess. It's like this world is being run by Yahweh. And it's like, if the roses have thorns, I don't think they're going to have thorns in heaven. It's like, when you touch something beautiful here, say you see a beautiful frog, you're in South America and you see a beautiful frog, and he's all colorful, and like a kid, you want to reach out and you want to touch him. You're all excited because you're seeing new things. Well, you touch him, he's poisonous. He'll kill you. A coral snake, one of the most beautiful snakes there are on the planet. They've got all this bright red. When you're a kid, you're taught red and yellow kill a fella. But it's like, is it a warning or is it just this world? Say you go on a hike in the mountains and you're having a great time, your whole family. You've been tubing down the stream, you've been doing all this stuff. Your kid steps on a rattlesnake and gets bit. Father's world is not going to be like this world. This world is dangerous. We're in a bad place. I don't know how we ended up here, but we're in a bad place. And this is why this statement is, a lot of preterists say, well, see, he said before this generation's gone, the kingdom of God will come into power. It's like, this is Mark 9, he said, and he said, truly, I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the kingdom of God has come with power. And after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him, and he led them to a high mountain where they were alone. There he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And there appeared before him Elijah and Moses, who were talking with him. Peter said to him, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He didn't know what to say, and they were frightened. Then a cloud appeared and covered them, and a voice came from the cloud, This is my son, whom I love, listen to him. Suddenly, when they looked around, they no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus gave them orders not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead, and they kept the matter to themselves, discussing what rising from the dead meant. But I think what he's talking about is this kingdom coming into power is the kingdom here, not the one in heaven. It's already in power in its place. And I think the kingdom did come into power right after his death. And the world was completely thrown into darkness. And that's where this outer darkness is. This will all make more sense as we get on with the video. I tried to organize this better because I've had people complain that I'm not as organized or something, but I feel like I'm being given so much information so fast that it's hard to organize it for y'all. And like right now, I'm on slide 8 of 127. And I cut a bunch of slides just because I don't want this to be so long nobody will listen to it. But this is real intense, this study. But it's very important to know this stuff. Okay. In Luke 10:22, we're told, "All things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows who the Son is except the Father, or who the Father is except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him." That's a very hard statement to accept because we got, 4 billion believers worshiping Jesus Christ. So, do they all know who the real Son and Father are? Or are they following the other one, like I said in John 5:43, that came in his own name? Did they receive Jesus Christ in his words? Is that the wrong one? You know, that's the question that went in my mind when I'm reading all this. Now, how do we know which is which? Jesus answered them in John 10:25, and he said, "I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name bear witness about me." Okay, so what are we looking at to determine which is which? The works. Okay, when we look at Yahweh's works, he's sending serpents to those that are hungry. He's angry. He's wrathful. He's full of punishment. He's choosing one nation over others, and he curses. He sends out evil spirits. He creates evil. He's sending out lying prophets and lying spirits. He has accepting blood sacrifice, human sacrifice. The picture painted in the Old Testament is not a pretty one. Even Moses, who served Yahweh and wrote the laws, never even got his promised land. So what do these works say to you? Think about it. Okay? Now we go to Jesus' works. He's setting the captives free. He's full of compassion. He feeds the hungry. He heals the sick. He gives sight to the blind, the hearing to the deaf. The cripples walk. The dead beings are raised. And he's laying down his life for us. Jesus taught a loving Father who rejoiced over the prodigal son, wished none would perish. He sent rain on the good and the evil. And I think, to me, this message becomes very clear. The works that Jesus did were not the works that Yahweh did in the Old Testament. And this is important to keep in mind. It's really a life and death decision. But I think I know who the real Father is now and the real Son. And I think they're Abba and Barabbas. Now, you're going to have to hear me out to the very end of this video or you'll never understand this, because it's complicated. Then we got this thing we're calling Jesus Christ when he said not to call him Christ. I mean, that's kind of bizarre. It's like, because, like I said, it never dawned on me in Matthew 24:5 until here recently that he was saying, that people will come in his name and they're going to say, I am the Christ, and this will be what's leading them astray. Because I always took that, when I read it, I guess because of conditioning, to mean that many are going to come saying I'm the Christ, like that they're the Christ. But I don't think that's what he meant. They're going to come in his name. And when you look at that in the Greek, it actually means superimpose on his name, saying that I am the Christ. So it literally makes that point of that it, because epi means like superimposing something on top of something else. Then we look at these other verses like Matthew 16:20. He charged his disciples they should tell no man that he was Jesus the Christ. I mean, he flat out told them, don't do this. And then in Mark 8:29, he says, and he said to them, and you whom do you say me to be? And Peter answered him, saying, you are the Christ. And he rebuked them, which is where he forbade them, that to no one they should tell concerning him this. It's like they're not supposed to tell him this. Then in Luke 9:20, then he said to them, but who do you say that I am? And Peter answered him, this is the same story being retold by Luke, the Christ of God. And he strictly charged and commanded them to tell this to no one. So he made a point, and I've talked to several people about this since I discovered it, and they were like, well, I remember asking about that when I was in Sunday school class, and they were like, oh, he just meant for that time, for that, don't say it right now. But I don't think so. If he's warning us, the first warning he gives in Matthew 24 for the end of the ages is that they're going to say this about me. I don't think he just meant it for right then, So it's something that we really need to look at, Now, John told us that there's only one son, not two, because he said he was a monogenes, or only begotten, which means there's only one from the Father, not two. Now, we have a verse where Barabbas is in front of Pilate, and Barabbas literally means son of Abba or Abba, and son of the Father, because Abba means Father. All right, when we look at where he prayed in Mark 14:36, and he said, Abba, Father, all things are possible unto thee. Take away this cup from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what thou wilt. Okay, what he's saying is he is calling on a name. He's calling on Abba. And y'all know from my video about the Father, I told you that I think Abram is the Father's name. Well, Abram just means exalted Father. It's the same thing. So we've only got one only begotten Son, and we have one that's calling his name Abba's Son, or the Son of Abba, or the Son of Father. I mean, that connecting the two, they match. It's like, and he said he came in his Father's name. He said, and you do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, you will receive him. Now, this is the reasons that I feel, and this is going to freak everybody out, but I feel Pilate did not kill Jesus Christ, but he did kill Jesus Barabbas. And you may want to stop it here and go over these and think about them for yourself. First one, Pilate knew the high priests were jealous or envious of Jesus. Okay, he said that in Matthew 27:18. He knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. Second, Pilate's wife had a horrible dream warning him not to kill Jesus. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream." Okay, the third reason I feel like it is Pilate was afraid to kill him. He says so in John 19:7. The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law he ought to die, because he has made himself the Son of God." And then in verse 8 it said, when Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. So he had fear going. Number 4, Pilate knew Jesus was innocent, and Herod also thought he was innocent. Mark 15:14, and Pilate said to them, "Why, what evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." Then in John 18:38, Pilate said to them, "What is truth?" After he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him." So he flat out told them, "I don't find him guilty." Luke 23:4, then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no guilt in this man." In verse 14 and 15, he said to them, "You brought me this man, one who was misleading the people, and after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any of the charges against him, neither did Herod." So he's even including Herod in that statement. "For he sent him back to us. Look, nothing deserving death has been done by him." So he found nothing to deserve for him to die. And then the fifth reason, Pilate would not have let a possible insurrectionist go free against the Roman government. And among the rebels in prison who had committed murder in the insurrection was a man called Barabbas, the son of the Father. So he was in among the prisoners who had committed murder, but he was not the murderer. And I'll prove that later on. But that's 5 really strong reasons why Pilate would not have killed Jesus Christ. I went through all of these places where I said, did Jesus ever admit to being the Christ? Okay, I went through Mark 14:61, and that is the only place that I found where they have it translated that I am, where he says I am, when he's asked, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?" And Jesus said, "I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming with the clouds of heaven." Okay, why did he say you will see the Son of Man? All right. Well, when I got to looking at that verse, it's mistranslated. It says, "I am not, and you will see the Son of Man." And I'm going to show you that verse broke down here in a few minutes. Then in Mark 15:2, and Pilate asked him, "Are you the King of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." He didn't say, "I am." He didn't say, "I am." Hey, it's me. I'm the King of the Jews. No, he never said that. He never admitted to it. Then I looked at Luke 22:67. "If you are the Christ, tell us." But he said to them, "If I tell you, you will not believe. And if I ask you, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man shall be seated at the right hand of the power of God." Okay, and then in Luke 23:2, and they began to accuse him, "We found this man misleading the nation, forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he is the Christ, a king." And Pilate asked him, "Are you the King of the Jews?" And he answered, "You have said so." It's not me saying it, in other words, is what he's saying. It's you. Then in John 10:24, so the Jews gathered around him and said to him, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly." And Jesus answered them, "I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name bear witness about me," and I just explained that to y'all. "But you do not believe, because you are not among my sheep. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. In other words, you're not part of me, so no, I'm not part of your group either, you know. Okay. Matthew 26:63, but Jesus remained silent, and the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus said, you have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power, coming on the clouds of heaven. So there we have it again. When he's asked, he said, you've said so, not me. But I'm telling you what's going to happen. The Son of Man's going to be seated at the right hand of power, coming on the clouds of heaven. Now, when I looked up what the Son of Man means, it means the son with a man face. Literally. I mean, if you break it down and look at the etymology of the words, it means the son with a man's face. So, he's telling them a lot in these statements, but not once did he ever say he was the Christ. Okay, now this gets into where it gets complicated. Okay, this is Mark 14:62, and Jesus said, and they have it, I am, but you shall see the Son of Man. Okay, they missed something here big time. See this little word here, D? That's a D and an E in Greek. And it is a negating particle. It acts when it follows an indicative verb. It acts like no or not. And it has specific rules. It has to have, like, the name Jesus starts with an I in Greek. And it has to be a vowel, which is a vowel. It has to be in front of a vowel. And it has to be involved with an indicative verb. So literally, it would negate at that point. It would become a no or a not. And this is a difficult rule, and I don't know how I picked up on it because I'm just learning Greek. I'm not like an expert or anything. I just feel like it was Father that said, okay, I'm going to show you how this worked and how they messed this up. Okay. And it said, so it would read, and Jesus said, I am not, but you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of the power and coming in the clouds of heaven. So this negated just like a no or a not would in English. It's just like you dropped off the not. And you'll see this later on how important this one little word becomes. And I have tried to get scholar after scholar to talk to me about it, and they don't want to. And probably the reason they don't want to talk to me is because there's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of Bibles printed. It's the #1 selling book that has ever been. And this is going to blow people out of the water to figure this out. But I think that I feel 100% confident in sharing this with you because I feel like Father revealed it to me. And I pray that you'll watch the video to the end because I think you will see what I'm talking about. John tells us many important things, and I put a lot of weight on John's book, and I've noticed that there's a lot of scholars trying to downplay John's book and say it was written much later and all this. I don't believe that. Okay. One thing he tells us, a physical birth did not have anything to do with Jesus, this title. It's like, because he told us, and if you shall see the Son of Man ascend up where he was before. The Son of Man was before in heaven, before his coming to earth. Like 38 times, over 38 times, Jesus tells us he was sent. And I'm going to try to do another video on that because that's complicated too. But he tells us he was sent here, and he's from above and we're from below. And I think there's some mistakes in that, in the virgin birth part also. Um, and this plays into, like when you look at Matthew 26, when we're talking about the same verses, you know, he said, "You have said so, but I tell you from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming on the clouds of heaven." Well, that matches when you go down here, "But you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power." It's the same. But in Mark, literally, he said, "I am not." Okay? I just gave you the context in case you want to read this in context, because I know everybody will accuse me of taking things out of context. And I'm going to cover verse 65 down here where they covered his face also, and explain that. I'm trying to talk a little faster because we're already like 34 minutes in, and I'm only on slide 16 of 126 slides. If you're wondering why I feel like I might be talking faster, and I try to pause these for a second in between recording them because I want to make sure that I give you accurate information, you know, and that you can understand why each slide was done. Acts 19 has some hidden stuff unless you're great at mincing words, because I never caught the fact that they were naming over those having evil spirits the name of Lord Jesus, and then forcing them to take an oath to the Jesus that Paul taught. I didn't even think about it when I read this, and it's probably because they used the word adjure. And that's not a common word that we use all the time, and we don't think about the meaning. But in verse 13 it said, certain of the wandering exorcist Jews took upon them to name over those having evil spirits in the name of Lord Jesus, saying, "We adjure you," and that means to force you to take an oath, "by Jesus whom Paul doth teach." So they were trying to make them take the oath over the Jesus that Paul was teaching, and not the one that we really knew. Okay. In verse 14, and there were certain of the 7 sons of Sceva, and Sceva means the mind readers, a Jew, a chief priest, who are doing this. And the evil spirits answered and said, "Jesus I know, and Paul I'm acquainted with, and ye, who are ye?" So why would the evil spirits be making note of Paul and Jesus? That is odd too. And the man in whom was the evil spirit leaped on them, mastered them, all of them, and overpowered them, that they fled out of the house naked and wounded. And this became known to all the residents in Ephesus, both Jews and Greeks, and fear fell upon them all, and the name of the Lord Jesus was extolled. Also many of those who were now believers came, confessing and divulging their practices. And a number of those that practiced magic arts, they brought their books or their biblios, which could have been Bibles, together, because it means scrolls, and burned them in the sight of all. And they counted the value of them and found it to be 50,000 pieces of silver. So the word of the Lord continued to increase and prevail mightily. And we know they were making them swear an oath, and we know that Jesus told us in Matthew 5:34, "I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven nor God's throne." And then when we look, who is the just, or justice, because justice means just, and that was James the Just. And that's, I think, who Paul was proclaiming as Jesus, because he says in Colossians 4:11, "And Jesus, which is called Justice, or the Just, who are of the circumcision, these are my fellow co-workers into the kingdom of God, which have been a comfort unto me." And like I explained, there's 2 separate kingdoms. So this gets complicated. It's like justice, meaning the just, and James going by the just. And you'll see even others in a historical context call James Christ, literally. This is the martyrdom of James, who was called the brother of the Lord. It's written in the church history by Eusebius. In the first thing it says, "But after Paul, in the consequence of his appeal to Caesar, had been sent to Rome by Festus, the Jews, being frustrated in the hope of entrapping him by snares which they had laid for him, turned against James, the brother of the Lord, to whom the epistle seat at Jerusalem had been entrusted by the apostles. The following daring measures were undertaken by them against him." Okay, leading him into their midst, they demanded of him that he should renounce faith in Christ in the presence of all people. But contrary to the opinion of all, and in a clear voice with a greater boldness than they had anticipated, he spoke out before the whole multitude and confessed that our Savior and Lord Jesus is the Son of God. But they were unable to bear longer the testimony of the man who, on account of his excellence of aesthetic virtue and of piety, which he exhibited in his life, was esteemed by the most just of men, and consequently they slew him. Opportunity for the deed of violence was furnished by a prevailing anarchy, which was caused by the fact that Festus had died just at this time Judea, and the province was thus without a governor and a head. The matter of James' death has been already indicated in the above quote words of Clement, who recorded that he was thrown from the pinnacle of the temple and was beaten to death with a club. But Hegepleius, who lived immediately after the apostles, gives an accurate account in his 5th book of the Memoirs. He writes as follows: "James, the brother of the Lord, succeeded to the government of the church in conjunction with the apostles. He has been called the Just, just like I told you, by all from the time of our Savior to the present day. There are many that bore the name James. He was holy from his mother's womb, and drank no wine or strong drink, nor did he eat flesh. No razor came upon his head, and he did not anoint himself with oil, and he did not use the bath. He alone was permitted to enter the holy places. He wore not woolen but linen garments, and he was a habit of entering alone into the temple, and was frequently found upon his knees begging forgiveness for the people, so that his knees became hard like that of a camel. In consequence of this constantly bending them to the worship of God and asking forgiveness of the people, because of his exceeding great justice, he was called the Just, or the Avis, which signifies in Greek the bulwark of the people and justice, in accordance with the prophets declared concerning him. Now some of the 7 sects, that's the same ones, which existed among the people, and which have mentioned by me in the Memoirs, asked him, what is the gate of Jesus? And he replied, it is the Savior. On account of these words, some believed that Jesus is the Christ, but the sects mentioned above did not believe, either in the resurrection or in one's coming to give to every man according to his works. But as many as believed did so on account of James. Therefore, when many even of the rulers believed, there was a commotion among the Jews and scribes and Pharisees, who said that there is a danger that the whole people would be looking for Jesus as the Christ. Coming therefore in a body to James, they said, we entreat thee, restrain the people, for they have gone astray in regard to Jesus as if he were the Christ. We entreat thee to persuade all that have come to the feast of the Passover concerning Jesus, for we have confidence in thee. For we bear thee witness, as do the people, that thou art just, and dost not respect persons. But thou therefore persuade the multitude not to be led astray concerning Jesus, for the whole people and all of us have confidence in thee. Stand therefore on the pinnacle of the temple, that the high position thou mayst be clearly seen, and that thy words may be readily heard by all the people. For all the tribes with the Gentiles also are come together on account of this Passover. The aforesaid scribes and Pharisees therefore placed James on the pinnacle of the temple, and cried out to him, and said, Thou just one, in whom we are all have confidence, for so much as the people are led astray after Jesus, the crucified one, declare to us what is the gate of Jesus. And he answered with a loud voice, Why do you ask me concerning Jesus, the Son of Man? So he's claiming that Jesus is actually the Son of Man. He himself sitteth in heaven at the right hand of the great power, and is about to come in the clouds of heaven. And when they were fully convinced and glorified in the testimony of James, he said, Hosanna to the Son of David. These are the scribes and Pharisees again to another. We have done badly in supplying testimony to Jesus, but let us go up and throw him down, in order that they may be afraid to believe him. So they wanted to get rid of his words and make it where they'd be afraid to believe what James was telling them. And they cried out and said, Oh, the just man is in error. And they fulfilled the scriptures written in Isaiah, Let us take away the just man, because he is troublesome to us. Therefore they shall eat the fruit of their doings. So they went up and threw down the just man, and said to each other, Let us stone James the just. And they began to stone him, for he was not killed by the fall. But he turned and knelt, and said, I entreat thee, Lord God our Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And while they were thus stoning him, one of the priests of the sons of Rechab, the son of Rechabites, I don't know if I said that right, who were mentioned by Jeremiah the prophet, cried out, saying, Cease what ye are doing, the just one prays for you. So they wanted him to claim that Jesus was the Christ, or that people were going astray by calling Jesus the Christ. And he let them know that he was Jesus, the Son of Man. And this gets even more interesting. And one of them, who was the fuller, took the club, which he beat out his clothes, and struck the just man on the head, and thus he suffered martyrdom. They buried him on the spot by the temple, and his monument still remains in the temple. He became a true witness both to the Jews and the Greeks that Jesus is the Christ. And immediately Vespasian besieged them. So they made it into where he became the witness that Jesus is the Christ by killing him. These things are related at length by Hipparchus, I can't pronounce his name either, who is in agreement with Clement. James was so admirable a man and so celebrated among the just that the more sensible even the Jews were of the opinion that this was the cause of the siege of Jerusalem, which happened to them immediately upon his martyrdom, for that no reason then their daring act against him. And Josephus at least was not hesitant to testify that this in his writings also, saying, These things happened to the Jews to avenge James the Just, who was the brother of Jesus, that is called the Christ. So he was calling him the Christ, calling James the Christ. For the Jews slew him, although he was a most just man. And the same writer records his death in the 20th books of Iniquities, the following words, By the emperor, when we learned of the death of Festus, sent Anibas to the prosecutor of Judea, and the younger Ananias, who was already said had obtained the high priesthood, was exceedingly bold and reckless in his disposition. Okay, I'm going to skip this next part because it's not really, and it says, these things are recorded in regard to James, who is said to be the author of the first so-called Catholic epistles, but it is observed that it is disputed. So some people dispute this. And likewise, he's also mentioned in the book of Jude. But I wanted to draw attention to the fact that they were calling James Christ. And later on I'll show you that he calls himself that also. When Jesus was on the cross, they told him, the centurion who stood there in Mark 15:39 said, he said, truly, this man was the Son of God. So he recognized him for who he was. Now, these are some of the questions that I asked myself. Was Jesus ever anointed as the King of the Jews to say that he was officially the Christ or the Messiah to the Jews? No. Did Jesus warn of a deception that they would say that he was the Christ? Yep. Is the kingdom of the Jews are waiting for their Messiah to rule an earthly one? Yes. They're waiting for the Messiah to come to rule here on earth, not up in heaven. Was Jesus' kingdom an earthly kingdom? No. Did Jesus claim to be the Son of the Father in heaven? Yes. Did Jesus claim to carry the Father's name? Yes. And this all goes back to this statement. I've come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, you'll receive him. And he even says in Luke 7, my head with oil thou did not anoint. But the woman anoints his feet. And then the comments that to tell no one that he is Jesus the Christ in Matthew 16:20 and those other verses I showed you. Then he prays to Abba Father in Mark 14:36. He makes a statement in John 18:36, and he does it several times. Jesus answered him, my kingdom's not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not of this world. Now, if he was king of the Jews, why would he be worried about being delivered over to the Jews? These are just some common sense things that we haven't really thought about. John 10:24-30 and 36-39. The Jews surrounded him and began to say, how long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly. Jesus answered them, I told you, you do not believe the works I do in my Father's name. These testify of me. But you do not believe because you are not of my sheep. My sheep listen to my voice, and they know them, and they follow me. And I give them eternal life, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my Father's hand. And I and my Father are one. Are you saying of him whom the Father sanctified and sent into the world, you are blaspheming, because I said I am the Son of God? If I do the works of my Father, and you do not believe me, but if I do them, even though you do not believe me, believe the works, so that you may know and understand the Father is in me, and I am in the Father. Therefore they were seeking against to arrest him, and he eluded their grasp. So all this whole time they're trying to arrest him or kill him or get rid of him. They did not proclaim him to be their king at all. And we have poor Barabbas being called everything from a revolutionary to a robber to an insurrectionist, a rebel, um, a revolutionary, a terrorist. I mean, it's like these verses, this is all the different versions of translation. It's like of John 18:40. And I was looking at this, scratching my head, and I'm like, was he a robber? Was he an insurrectionist? Was he a revolutionary? What was he? Um, they really do a number on all this stuff. This is a list of the appearances of Jesus Christ after the ascension into heaven. Okay. And he said, if any man say they have seen me, believe him not. You know. Okay, in 36 AD, we have the vision of Christ by Saint Stephen. In 31 to 36 AD, we have Paul saying he saw him on the road to Damascus. In 31 to 36 AD, we have a conversation between Jesus and Saint Ananias in Damascus. That's in Acts 9, verses 10 through 18. Then in 45 AD, we have Christ appearing to Paul in the temple in Acts 22. Then we have a mention, and why do we have a mention of Christ in Rome between 41 and 54 AD, way after the ascension date? We have Suetonius, who was a Roman historian, an analyst of the imperial house of the Emperor Hadrian, that mentions Christ well after this. Okay, he said, because the Jews at Rome caused constant disturbance at the instigation of Christus, or Christ, he, talking about Claudius, expelled them from the city of Rome. And this is like way after the ascension date. And that kind of brings up, then we have John in the book of Revelation. And I don't really think that, they list that as seeing him or an appearance, but I don't call it an appearance. Revelation means revealing. What he's revealing is who Jesus Christ is. That's what that whole book is about. That would make a whole nother video. I think this all comes back to Paul again, just like my Paul video, okay? Because he's got this person he's calling Justice, or the Just. And he also calls him Jesus. All right? And then in Galatians 1:7, not that there is another one, but there are some who trouble you and want to distort the gospel of Christ. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be accursed. And as we have said before, so now I say again, if anyone preaching to you a gospel contrary to the one you received, let him be accursed. So he's like, does that sound like that's from Father? I'm going to curse you. If you preach a different Jesus or different gospel, I'm going to curse you. Romans 3:7. He even tells you, but if through my lie God's truth abounds to his glory, why am I being condemned as a sinner? Then in 2 Colossians 11:4, for if someone comes and proclaims another Jesus than the one we proclaim, okay, so there's more than one Jesus? That's what we have to assume from that. Or if you receive a different spirit from the one you received, or if you accept a different gospel from the one you accepted, you put up with it. readily enough. He is making a real point of there being two different Jesuses, and he's teaching the right one and everybody else is wrong. So that right there tells you that there's a problem. And I was looking at Isaiah 53, the big prophecy, of all of this, and it's like Barabbas fits the prophecy by being counted with the revolt, but being innocent. When we look at Luke 22:35 through 38, he said to them, "When I sent you out without money bag, traveling bag, or sandals, did you lack anything?" "Not a thing," they said. Then he said to them, "But now whoever has a money bag should take it, and also a traveling bag, and whoever doesn't have a sword should sell his robe and buy one. For I tell you, what is written must be fulfilled of me." And he was counted among the outlaws. Yes, what was written about me is coming to fulfillment. And they said, "Lord," they said, "look here, 2 swords. Enough of that," he told them. He knew what they were going to do, Then we go back to this, and among the rebels in prison who had committed murder in the insurrection, there was a man named Barabbas, the son of Abba, or father. So he was in among all the murderers and the insurrectionists and all. I don't think he was an insurrectionist, though. Now, when we read Isaiah 53, it says, "And Yahuwah was pleased to crush him. He laid sickness on him. And when he made himself an offering for guilt, he would see a seed. He would prolong his days, and the pleasure of Yahuwah would prosper in his hand. He would see the result of the suffering of his life and be satisfied. Through his knowledge, my righteous servant makes many righteous, and he bears their crookedness. Therefore I give him a portion among the great, and he divides the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his being unto death, and he was counted with the transgressors, and he bore the sin of many and made intercession for the transgressors." Okay, was he really killed is the thing, okay? The one that is serving Yahweh. It doesn't sound like it, because he says that he would prolong his days. It's like, that doesn't sound like he's going to die. He would be given a portion with the great and divide the spoils with the strong. That's the booty, whatever they got from this. Amy Jill Levine wrote a book, The Bible with and Without Jesus, and she said, rather than dying, the servant will not only live, he will be exalted and lifted up, and shall be very high. And she notes on 53:10, "He shall see his offspring and shall prolong his day." God promises, "I will allot him a portion with the great and divide the spoils with the strong." These verses confirm that the various references to the death throughout are metaphorical. I don't think they're metaphorical. I think they mean that Yahweh's servant is going to cause this other person to die, and he's going to divide the spoil and then see his seed and live on and be lifted up real high. Now, one reason I say that is when you look at the Septuagint, it reads different. Like when you look at verse 11, it says, "The Lord also pleased to take away from him the travail of his soul, and to show him light, and to form him with understanding, to justify the just one who serves many well, and he shall bear their sins." So there's a just one who's going to do this and divide the spoils and live long and have his seed prolonged and all that stuff, see his seed or have a child and all. I don't think it was the one that was killed. I know that sounds strange because of the way we've been taught, but prolonging the days is not killing somebody, I think Jesus knew their plans to make him out to be a robber, and this is why he said, "as a robber." And also, he was under the same crime sentence as the other 2 men who died with him. So let's look at that. Let's see, Matthew 26:55. "And at that hour Jesus said to the crowds, 'Have you come out against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? He says, as against a robber. So he's making a point of letting us know that they're coming at him like he is a robber. And then in Mark 14:48, he says, and Jesus said to them, have you come out as against a robber with swords, clubs to capture me? And then in Luke 22:52, and Jesus said to the chief priest and the officers of the temple and the elders who had come out against him, have you come out as against a robber? So he was making a point of letting us know that they're going to treat me like a robber, you know. And one of the verses even says, you know, when I was in the temple daily, why didn't you grab me there? You know, it's like, I'm paraphrasing, but it's like he made a point of letting us know that they were treating him like a robber. All right, and then in Luke 23:32, two others were criminals, were led away to be put to death with him. One of the criminals who were hanged railed at him, saying, are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us. But the other rebuked him, saying, do not fear God, you are under the same sentence of condemnation. And we indeed justly, for we receiving the due reward of our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong. And he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And he said to him, truly, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. So these two robbers are hanging there. They're under the same crime, same condemnation as him. So it's like he was making a point of letting us know what they were going to do. I made this card just so you could see this word epi in Matthew 24:5. It means superimposing upon the name. Like the primary definition is properly to superimposition of time, place, or order, like putting something on top of something else. So he was saying they're going to put Christ on top of my name, like they're going to call me Christ. But I made this so you could look at it. You may want to look at that in the actual Thayer's and Strong, and because superimposition means the act of superimposing or the state of being superimposed. So he's going to be superimposed as the Christ. When we look at Matthew 9 and Luke 5, we can see that Jesus was hanging out with the sinners. And his reason he gives for that is those that are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. For he came to call not the righteous, but the sinners. He came to convert them to following Father and repenting. And it's like, then I think that what happened was he was probably arrested with them. And because when you look at Mark 15:7, among the rebels in prison who had committed murder and insurrection, there was a man called Barabbas, or Abba's son, or the son of the Father. You can say it either way. And there was one called Abba's son, bound, laying bound with them that had made an insurrection. Men who in the insurrection had committed murder. That's the different various ways they phrase it, but when I looked at the Greek, it definitely meant that he was in with a bunch of people that had caused an insurrection and they had committed murder and he was arrested with them. That's the way it reads to me. You can look it up in the Greek and see what you think. But he made this point about this as against a robber, so we would connect these things. I'm not sure why this clicked in my head, but it did. Luke 2:12, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, neither hid that shall not be known. Well, when I got to looking into the research of the crucifixion, ancient Romans, this is from a website on the methods that they use for crucifixion. Ancient Romans loved a good crucifixion. It was at one time a primary method used to torture and kill countless numbers of slaves. Crucifixion didn't always involve nailing the accused to the cross. Sometimes the accused was stripped, his head was covered, and he was tied down onto the cross or the fork, and he was flogged, sometimes until he died. Didn't even make it, you know. But the main thing I wanted to note on here was his head was covered. I had never even thought about that, you know. But then when you go and look at Mark 14:65, and some began to spit on him and to cover his face and to strike him, saying, Prophesy. And the guards received him with blows. They were fisticuffing him. And they've changed this cover his face in a lot of the newer translations to blindfolded him, which is not correct, because the word for cover his face is paracalypto, which means to cover entirely the whole surface of the face. So his entire face was covered. Nobody would have known who was up there being crucified, especially after he was pulverized and his face was covered. Okay, now we do know that this face cloth was also in the tomb, because in John 26, then Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths laying there, and the face cloth was separate, which had been on his head. He makes a point of saying that too. It was not lying with the linens, but folded up in a place by itself. So John is letting us know, again, here is John. A lot of what I pick up from about Jesus comes from John, and I know there's a reason for that. And Isaiah 52 kind of confirms this, because in verse 14 it says, Just as there are many who were appalled at him, his appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any man, and his form marred beyond human likeness. So nobody would have known that whether it was him or not. And also in Mark, I was running out of room on this slide, but in Mark 15:19, and they were striking his head with a reed and spitting on him and kneeling down to pay homage to him. They were mocking him. Now, I worked many years in the emergency room, and most people have never seen anybody beat to a pulp. So I included this photo. I hope it doesn't gross you out. But I wanted to make an impression here as to, this is river reeds here in the background. And if you got beat in the face with one of them, nobody would know who you were. This is the same girl. This is after she was deformed in a beating. There's no way. And they were striking his head with one of these. So the crowd would not have known if Barabbas was switched for Jesus Christ. And we can say Jesus Barabbas because his name literally was Jesus Barabbas, and then there was Jesus called the Christ. They also did this in order to make it look like he was Yahweh's boy, because Jesus gives us this hint too. Now there in Luke 16:19, and there was a certain rich man, he was clothed in purple and fine linen, living in luxury every day. A certain beggar named Lazarus was taken to the gates full of sores, and desiring to be fed the crumbs he fell from the rich man's table, yes, even the dogs came and licked his sores. The beggar died and was carried away by the angels to Abram's bosom. The rich man who died was buried. in Hades he lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and saw Abram far off, and Lazarus at his bosom. He cried out and said, Father Abram, have mercy on me. Send Lazarus that he might dip his finger in the water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame. So the rich people were clothed in purple and fine linen. And when we read that thing about James earlier, you'll notice that he was clothed in fine linen. Okay. Now when they bring out, it says in Mark 15:17, they clothed him in purple and planted a crown of thorns and put it about his head. And when they had mocked him, they took off the purple from him and put his own clothes back on him and led him out to be crucified. And in Revelation, we're told that the woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and decked with gold. This is giving you a clue, as to who it was doing all this stuff. And they were mocking him like he was Jesus Christ by putting this purple robe on him. But he was Jesus Barabbas. He was the real Son of the Father. And so they couldn't send him. They showed him off like that, but then they put his own clothes back on him. It's pretty sick. And this is telling you that this is Yahweh's boy, because he goes into depth in Exodus 28:4. I won't read all this because this is running way long. But they take and use gold and purple and scarlet and all the fine linens to make the robes for Yahweh's priest. But he didn't have it when they put his clothes back on him. They had to just make out like he did for a little bit, and then they put him back in his real clothes. In John's version, we see that they paraded Jesus as though he was claiming to be the prophesied Messiah and King of Israel. It says in John 19:1, then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him, and the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and arrayed him in a purple robe, which would be like the high priest's robe. They came up to him saying, Hail, King of the Jews, and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, See, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no guilt in him. So Pilate's still saying, I don't find any guilt in this man. So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, and Pilate said to him, Behold the man. When the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried, Crucify him, crucify him. And Pilate said to them, Take him yourself and crucify him. I find no guilt in him. Over and over, Pilate is saying, I don't find any guilt in him. The Jews answered, We have a law. According to that law, he ought to die because he made himself the Son of God. When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid. Pilate was scared of this whole situation, it seems. And when they had mocked him, this is in Matthew 27:31, we know that once they've done all this mocking and parading him, then they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes back on him, and then led him away to be crucified. So that's real interesting. It's like they made a spectacle out of him. And did they do that so they would think he was somebody else? I think they probably did. It's like, I think that was probably James the Just that was, going to take his place, that had the purple robe, and they put it on Jesus Barabbas and paraded him around after he'd been beat up and pulverized to a pulp, and had his head covered so nobody would know the difference. I know this sounds far-fetched, but I don't really think it is. I think it's really happened. This all starts coming together once you see it. Or to me it did. It may be clear as mud to you by now, but okay, in Luke 23:50, we're told about this Joseph character that from Arimathea that takes the body and puts it in this brand new grave and all this stuff. Okay, I think verse 50 actually tells us who he is, because it says, "And behold, a man named Joseph, a counselor, a good man, and the just." He was, so this would be James the Just, probably, because he's also called Barsabbas, and Joseph Barsabbas is in Acts. James is given a whole lot of names in here. The same had not consented to the counsel and the deed of them, and of Arimathea, a city of the Jews, who also himself waited for the kingdom of God. I didn't read these words they added, because they add a lot of words. Now, when I looked up this word right here, consented, it was like, it means to deposit a vote, to be in agreement. So they voted on what they were going to do. Now, who is they? Okay, this goes back, I think, Cleopas is Peter, because I looked that up at one point, and I remember it being the Aramaic for Kepha. It's like it's in the same name thing, but it's in a different language. And we're told in Mark 15:1, as soon as it was morning, the chief priests had a consultation with the elders and the scribes and the whole council, and they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him to Pilate. Okay, this in Luke 23, I think, is the consultation. It's like where they voted and decided what they were going to do, because it had already been prophesied by Cleopas that nor do they understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people than for the whole nation should perish. It was Cleophas who had advised the Jews it would be expedient that one man should die for the people. So they had to come up with some plan to get rid of Jesus. And I think that they actually voted on what they were going to do. It's pretty sad. I put this card in here because there are two negating particles. And the negating particle is like our no or not in English. Like, no, he didn't do it type thing. And they use a lot of this in the Greek. It's really, it's mind-boggling. But you've got DE, which is a negating particle, and then you have the other negating particle. Well, they always pick up on this one for some reason, and it falls with a subjunctive verb, and the DE falls with an indicative verb. And here you can see the subjunctive one, not, it may not pass by, and that would be in no wise pass from the law, okay? But they don't ever pick up on this other one. But I wanted to show you how this works, because it's usually before the verb, but sometimes there'll be like a phrase in between, and then the verb will fall over here, But when they're using the DE, it has to follow, the following letter has to be a vowel or a plosive consonant, and it has to be used with an indicative verb. So there's 3 rules for DE to be read as a negating particle instead of like but or also or even, the other words they use in there. But for it to say no or not, it has to follow those 3 rules. And I gave the website here. If you just Google DE etymology, this website will come up with all this information, so you can look it up for yourself. Then I added these 3 cards, and these are just some more things, like you can see how it works here. This would be I am. Then when you add the DEV, which is the long version of DE, it says I am not. So that's what a negating particle does. It turns the sentence around to a negative. And here's some more. It talks about the short version and the long version. And I gave you this website, and this is actually listed under difficult Greek translations. And I don't know, it just had to be Father that I picked up on this. But I just put these in there so you could read through them if you want to. And that's the last page on it, I think. Nope, I was wrong. Okay, now, those pages were for you to take your time and read through if you want to. If you don't want to, you can go to the wiki site. It's real simple. They give the best, easiest to understand explanation. Okay, here's the 3 civil trials. This is the scriptures we're going to be looking at. And now we're getting into the meat of what happened at the trial. Matthew 27. Okay, what I did here was I took what we have in English in our translation. These blue inserts are what I got when I looked at the Greek, and I'm going to explain those after I read through this. Okay, and this is Matthew 27, starting in verse 11. And Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor did question him, saying, Art thou the king of the Jews? And Jesus said to him, Thou sayest. So he's not admitting to anything. And in his being accused by the chief priest and the elders, he did not answer anything, and that's reaffirmed in verse 12. Then said Pilate to him, Dost thou not hear how many things thou witness against thee? And he did not answer him, not even one word. So the governor did wonder greatly. It made him wonder, well, why is he not answering? Okay, then we go to 15. And at the feast, the governor had been accustomed to release one to the multitude, a prisoner whom they willed. And they had then a noted prisoner called Barabbas. Now, some versions have noted, some have notorious, but the only other place that word is translated, it's notable prisoner. So somebody that was known. Okay, Matthew 27:17. They therefore, having been gathered together, Pilate said to them, Whom shall I release to you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Christ? For he had known that because of envy they had delivered him up. So Pilate knew their real motive. And he was sitting on the tribunal. His wife sent unto him, saying, Nothing to thee, to that righteous one, for many things did I suffer today in a dream because of him. So he's got Pilate's wife warning him also not to kill him. And the chief priests and the elders persuade the multitude that they might ask for themselves Barabbas and might destroy Jesus. Okay, that's confusing in itself because both of them are called Jesus. So you don't know which one. But when I looked at that verse, the negating particles in there, and it says the chief priests and elders did not persuade the multitude that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. Which I went, wow, okay. So we keep going. And the governor answering them said, Which of the two will I shall release to you? And they said, Barabbas. is what we have in our text. And then I get down here and it said, but the governor said unto them, who of the two do you desire to be released to you? And they said, not the Barabbas. And that's the actual word that's in there, the Barabbas, which basically means the same thing. It's a different version of the same name. But I thought that was very interesting that those negating particles are in those two verses. Then we keep going. And Pilate said to them, what then shall I do with Jesus who is called the Christ? Now there he makes a distinction that this is Jesus who is called the Christ. And all of them said, let him be crucified. Okay, and the governor said, why? What evil did he do? And they were crying out even the more, let him be crucified. So Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning. He took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves, is what we have. Okay, I looked at that very carefully, because I just cannot imagine a Roman officer that's that high up wanting to kill somebody that was innocent when he had a government insurrectionist in there. Okay, and it said, this is what I got. But the Pilate, seeing that none benefited, but rather a tumult came to pass, laying hold of the water, washed off his hands before the crowd, saying, you shall see, I am innocent of the blood of the just. And that's what his exact words was, the just. I'll show you that slide where I looked at the interlineary on that. I was like, wow. He did not want to kill the just one. And see, the just one was functioning like a high priest in the temple. I'll show you that later too. And all the people answered, his blood be on us and our children. Then he released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. And that's not what I got in the Greek on that either. This is what I got. Then he dismissed them, not Barabbas. The Barabbas, not the Jesus, he handed over scourged so that he would be crucified. I mean, you can sit and look at these, and you can look at the interlineary and see what you think, but I'm telling you, I think that we've been duped over. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole battalion before him. And they stripped him and put on a scarlet robe, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head, and put a reed in his right hand, and kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they spit on him, and they took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe, and put his clothes back on him, and led him away to crucify him. So that was the part I was telling y'all about, where they put the clothes on him, then they take the clothes back off. Then I wanted to talk about this word notorious. We have him in our script as saying that they had a notorious criminal or a notorious prisoner, okay? Well, when you break that word down, it's epi, which means above, and sign, a sign from above. So it's not notorious. It's like in Romans 16:7, it is actually translated in the NSA as outstanding or of note. But technically, when you break that word down into the two compound words it's made from, it means that they had a prisoner with a sign from above, or a mark from above, because it's the same word for mark. I think I put that, did I put, yeah, bearing a mark, notable. And see, you've got two definitions here, notorious and outstanding. It can't be both. those are opposites, polar opposites. And judging from the two words it comes from, I would say that it means a sign or a mark from above. It breaks my heart, really. Okay, we're going to look at Matthew 27:20. And this is the one that I got. The high priest and the elders did not persuade the crowds that they request Barabbas but destroy the Jesus. Okay, like I told you, this is confusing because both of them were named Jesus. That's probably why they took Jesus off of Barabbas in some of the translations, is because of the confusion of the wording. But we're going to look at it anyway. All right, you've got two particles. You've got DE here and DE here. Okay, then you've got a verb here and another verb down here. All right, let's look at the first phrase first. All right, we're going to take out the high priest and the elders because that is just telling you who the verb is about. Okay, and look strictly at the negating particle. Okay, we know that if it's no or not, that the following letter has to be a vowel. So you've got a vowel there, okay, and we know that the verb has to be an indicative verb, which to convince is an indicative verb. So this one would be not. Now, why is this one not the same thing? Okay, because to destroy fully is a subjective verb. It's not an indicative verb. So this one would be but. So this would be the rendering that I would come up with. The high priest and the elders did not persuade the crowds that they should request the Barabbas, but destroy the Jesus. And that's how I came up with this. This is something that if you really want to know about it, you're going to have to study it out. I color-coded all this so you can pause and look at, okay, see, this is a DE, it's a negating particle, if it follows these rules down here, in which it follows all three criteria. I included this slide just to show you something here interesting. This is where I took that beginning phrase and threw it into a translator. All I did was take out the elders and the high priest and the elders phrase and put it into without the who it's talking about, and it comes up with the they did not persuade. It picks up on it. Now, I think a lot of the AI have been programmed to pick up on Bible verses, so if you throw the entire verse in there, you get spit out the King James Version instead of what is actually said. You have to either change the names, like I've taken and put it in a common name of just an everyday person, and I get a more accurate reading of what is actually there than I do if I put the whole Bible verse in. It's really strange. It's like they're pre-planning with their AI how to circumvent us even seeing this stuff. But like I said, when you took out that middle phrase and put it in there, it picks up on the negating particle. It's pretty interesting. Okay, we're going to look at Matthew 27:21. What I got on this was, but the governor said unto them, who of the two do you desire to be released to you? And they said, not the Barabbas. Okay, how did I come up with that? All right, first off, the verb is said, which is indicative. You've got the DE, which becomes a negating particle because it follows the vowel, follows it. I say that backwards every time, but if the first letter is a vowel or a plosive consonant, then it's going to be a negating. So it would, instead of they said, the Barabbas, they said not the Barabbas. So strange. And I'm not sure why there are a lot of negating words in the New Testament, but there are. It may be the way Greek is spoken or written. I'm not sure. I hope this is making sense for y'all. This is that verse that I was going to show you, that it shows that he's talking about the just. When it says, you can see the words here, the just, and you shall see. It's like, so it could be, I am innocent of the blood of the just, you shall see, or you shall see, I'm innocent of the blood of the just, whichever way you want it. This phrase, like I said, could go either way, in front or behind that. But there's no doubt what he's talking about is the just. He's talking about a person called the just. And they put the just one, and I don't know where they got one from, shall see to it. I don't know where they got to it. I don't know how they do this, but flat out, that's what I got. Matthew 27:26 is kind of unusual in some ways, but then not really. They've added some words in here. It's like they've got, then released he Barabbas unto them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Okay, you can tell this one was lightened. So that word is just put in there, they say, when you listen to them, to make the sentence more smooth in English. But I don't buy that. Okay. This is what I'm looking at here. It's like, okay, unto them, for number one, you've got atuos, which is them right here. Okay, it's a datative plural. They've labeled it as datative. Well, what datative means, it's a case. In a grammatical case, it's something used in language to indicate the recipient or the beneficiary of the action. Okay, well, if that be the case, then when you read the sentence here, then he dismissed them. They are the recipients of the action of what's done. There shouldn't have been a to in there. And the Barabbas, not the Jesus, he scourged and he handed over so that he should be crucified. And again, this is very hard to tell because you've got two Jesus, and instead of saying Jesus Barabbas and Jesus the crucified, you've just got Barabbas and Jesus. Well, both of them are Jesus. But I'm fixing to show you about this indicative, this negating particle right here, how it follows the indicative verb. Okay, here we go. All right. First, we've got the particle, then we look for the verb. Handed over is an indicative verb. Okay. And the negating particle is followed by a vowel. Right there. So, this is how I would read that sentence. Then he dismissed them, the Barabbas, not the Jesus, he handed over scourged so that he could be crucified. And I just don't get how they come up with, because the not falls in between the two names. So it would be in between the two names. It's like I watched one guy's video and he was like, oh, you know how Greek is, you just move the words around wherever you want to. I don't think that was the way it was supposed to be either. And they have this as released, but it's actually in other places translated as dismissed. And I think he was dismissing the high priest and stuff and then dealing with this, you know. I hope that made sense. Then we go to Mark 15. Now we're going to read through Mark 15. And as soon as it was morning, the chief priest held a consultation with the elders and the scribes and the whole council. And they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate. And we went over that part. That's where they were voting and all. And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." So he's not admitting anything. He's just stating that they're accusing him of this. And the chief priests accused him of many things. And Pilate asked him again, "Have you no answer to make? See how many charges they bring against you?" But Jesus made no further answer, so that Pilate was amazed. Now at the feast he used to release for them one prisoner for whom they asked. And among the rebels in prison who had committed murder in the insurrection was that there was a man called Barabbas, or son of the father. And the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do as he usually did for them. And he answered them, saying, "Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews?" For he perceived that it was out of envy that the chief priest had delivered him up. But the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have him release for them Barabbas instead. Now what I got on verse 11 was, but the chief priest incited the crowd so that rather than Barabbas, he dismissed them. I'll show you the interlineary on that. And Pilate again said to them, "Then what shall I do with the man you call the King of the Jews?" And they cried out again, "Crucify him." And Pilate said to them, "Why, what evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Okay, now on verse 15 I got, the Pilate was not sufficiently minded or disposed to the people to release Barabbas unto them, and delivered the Jesus scourged to be crucified. And again, here we go again with the names. It's like it would have been much better if he'd have said Jesus Barabbas and Jesus the one they call the Christ, so that we would know exactly what happened better. But they didn't write it that way. Okay, it's implied in Mark 15:7 that Barabbas was among the rebels that had committed murder, but there's no clear statement he was the one who had committed the murder. They've got this worded very differently in the different versions. It's like the Dudum Rhine, which is an 1899 edition. I have that Bible, and it said he was with seditious men who in the sedition had committed murder. And it seems like as these versions get newer and newer, he becomes the position of the one of the murderer, instead of that he was arrested and in among the murderers. Do you see the difference? It's like they were separate, but he was with them. You can read through these, but I was pretty amazed because the newer versions seem to have changed, changed a bit. Now the Darby down here is kind of an older one. It said, now there was the named Barabbas, because person was in gray, so it wasn't even in there. Bound with those who had made insurrection that had committed the murder. Okay, and they inserted him and person. It's like they take on these different things and kind of change up the meaning, because it's really, I mean, to say that you were in the same jail cell with a murderer is a different thing than saying you're the actual murderer, if you see what I mean. Okay, here's an actual interlineary, and this one I think is based off the King James because it's the one I got off the East Sword. When you look at this word, it was which some in the standing did make murder. So somebody in the standing that was in there had committed murder, not him. That's what I'm talking about. They really do a number on this stuff to try to, I don't know if it was a intentional, I can almost imagine that it was because of all the places where that negating particle fall. I mean, they fall in the verses that were the choice verses, like choosing between Jesus Barabbas and Jesus Christ, if you see what I mean. It's like, seems like they all fell in those situations. Okay, and in verse 10, again, we have that datative word for them, which they translate as to them, but it's like, I don't think it was, because it was like he dismissed them. It's just a complete thought, you know. To put two in there really did not make any sense to me. It's right here. I'm sorry, I forgot to turn the pointer on. But see, let's look. But the chief priest incited the crowd or the common people, so that rather, and they've got rather him, Barabbas, he dismissed them. Because there's a word in there right here that means rather than him, right there. Barabbas, and that identifies who him is. He dismissed them. Do you see what I mean? That's kind of a little tricky, more of a tricky one to kind of figure out, but it's like it falls right after the verse where he said, for he knew that the chief priests had delivered him out of envy. So following that train of thought, he's talking about he's dismissing them, not Barabbas. Okay, so now we look at 15:15 on the interlineary look, here. You've got the particle DE, and I questioned whether this one should be not. That's why I put that little question mark there, but I think it is. And because it is in front of a plosive consonant, so I'm pretty sure that it is, should be reading not. And the indicative verb would be release. And like I told you, what I got was the Pilate was not sufficiently minded or disposed to the people to release Barabbas unto them, and delivered the Jesus scourged to be crucified. And they added a him in there, and I'm not sure why. Because you really didn't need it. And this could be instead of the Pilate could be he. Pilate, he was not sufficiently minded, because the is also can be a pronoun. But I'm just still seeing the same thing over and over. I think it's more apparent in Luke than it is even in Mark, and we're going to look at that too. Luke chapter 23. Okay, chapter 23, verse 1. Then the whole company of them arose and brought him before Pilate. Here we have a big crowd, and the high priest and the scribes and the elders and the entire council going to Pilate. So Pilate is inundated with a bunch of people. And they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king." And their statements are obviously lies, because in Luke 20:24 he says, "Show me a denarius. Whose likeness and inscription does it have?" And they said, "Caesar's." And he said to them, "Then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And he knew they were trying to trap him. And then when they said he was calling himself Christ and the King, well, we know that's not true, because he told them not to call him the Christ. In John 6:5, perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. So he got away from the people when they wanted to try to make him a king. And in John 18:36, Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from this world." So he made it real clear he was not the king of the Jews. Then in verse 3, and Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him again. He answered the same way, "You have said so." And Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no guilt in this man." So Pilate flat out said, "This man is not guilty." But they were urgent, saying, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout Judea and Galilee, even to this place." When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him over to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had long desired to see him, because he had heard about him and was hoping to see some signs done by him. So he questioned him at some length, but he made no answer. The chief priest and the scribes stood by, and they were vehemently accusing him. And Herod with his soldiers treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then, arraying him in splendid clothing, again here we go with the clothing, he sent him back to Pilate. Now, see, this goes back to Mark 15:17, and they clothed him in a purple cloak and twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on him. And after they mocked him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes back on him, and then led him out to crucify him. So he was not in these fancy clothes to begin with. And in Luke 23:12, and Herod and Pilate became friends with each other that very day, for before that they had had enmity with each other. I'm not sure why they became friends, unless it was just the common working on this case together. I don't know why that was included. I know there's got to be a reason, but I'm not sure why. Pilate then called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, and he said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was misleading the people. And after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any of the charges against him." If Pilate found him innocent, and so did Herod, a Jew himself, also decided he was innocent, Pilate knew they were jealous of him. His wife warned him not to kill him, and then why would he ever send him to the cross? That doesn't make sense with him being a Roman official like that, and Barabbas being the other choice, and him being an insurrectionist against the government. That just doesn't make sense to me. Okay? In verse 15, neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, there's nothing deserving of death that has been done by him. So Herod also agreed that, he was innocent. I will therefore punish and release him. But they all cried together, away with this man, and release to us Barabbas, who for certain sedition in the city and for a murder was cast into prison. Now that's not what I got on that verse when I looked at the interlineary, and I'm going to show that. I got, who was present by means of sedition, someone made in the city. It said someone, not him, and murder, and was desecrated in prison. So it's basically saying he was raped in prison. But he was thrown in with those from a sedition, and that's kind of the same impression I got from Mark also. Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus, but they kept shouting, crucify him, crucify him. A third time he said to them, why, what evil has he done? I found in him no guilt deserving death. I will therefore punish and release him. So that's the second time he said he's going to punish him and release him. But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified, and their voices were prevailing. Now, what I got on verse 23 was very telling to me. This is when I translated what I got. He did not rest upon numerous voices demanding that he be crucified, and prevailed against those shouting, even the high priest. And then verse 24, so Pilate decided that their demands should be granted. I got, Pilate did not give the sentence that it should be as they required. And I'm going to show y'all these. He released the man who had been thrown in prison for insurrection and murder, for whom they asked, but he delivered Jesus over to their will. Now what I got on verse 25 was he did not release to them the one put in prison through insurrection and murder, whom they asked for. He did not hand over the Jesus to the will of them. So it's like I'm considering that he's calling Barabbas Jesus in that sentence. And then verse 26, and they led him away, having taken hold of Simon, a certain Cyrene, coming from the field, and they put the cross to bear behind Jesus. Okay, what I got on 26 was, and they took him away, and they laid hold of Simon, the native of Cyrene, coming from the field, and they laid the cross on the back behind the Jesus. Verse 27, and there was following him a great multitude of people, and of women, who were also beating themselves and lamenting him. And Jesus, having turned to them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but for yourselves. Weep ye and for your children. For lo, days to come, in which they shall say, Happy the barren and the wombs that did not bear, and the paps that did not give suck. Then they shall begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if in the green tree they do these things, in the dry, what may happen? So he's saying right there, if they do this when the tree is green, what in the heck are they going to do when it is dry? Because he knew what was happening. And there were also others, 2 evildoers, with him, to be put to death. And when they came to the place that is called the Skull, there they crucified him and the evildoers, one on the right hand and one on the left. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they have not known what they do. And parting his garments, they cast a lot. And the people were standing, looking on, and the rulers were sneering with them, saying, Others he saved, let him save himself. If this be the Christ, the choice one of God. So they were like, okay, if he's the Christ, then he should be able to save himself. And this is interesting, one on the right and one on the left. Who do you think was on the left and right drinking the same cup? We're pretty much told. In Mark 10:35, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came near to him, saying, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we will ask. And he said to them, What do you want me to do for you? And they said to him, Grant us that we may sit on your right and on your left hand in your glory. But Jesus said to them, You don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? And they said to him, We are able. And Jesus said to them, You shall indeed drink the cup that I drink, and you shall be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit at my right hand or at my left hand is not mine to give, but for whom it has been prepared. When the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant toward James and John. Jesus summoned them and said to them, You know that they who are recognized as rulers over the nations lord it over them, and the great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever wants to become great among you shall be your servant. Whoever of you wants to become first among you shall be my bondservant of all. For the Son of Man also came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Now we know this cup from where he was praying when he said in Matthew 26:39, and going a little further, he fell on his face and prayed, My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. So this cup thing goes right back to the prayer in the garden. And in Luke 23:33, and when they came to the place that is called the Skull, they crucified him there with the criminals, one on the right and one on the left. And he said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Dividing his garments among them, they cast lots. The people stood watching. The rulers of them scoffed at him, saying, He saved others, let him save himself. If this is the Christ of God, his chosen one. The soldiers also mocked him, coming to him and offering him vinegar, and saying, If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself. An inscription was written over him in the letters of Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, This is the King of the Jews. One of the criminals who was hanged insulted him, saying, If you are the Christ, save yourself and us. But the other answered and rebuked him, saying, Don't you even fear God, seeing you are under the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong. He said to Jesus, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said to him, Assuredly, I tell you, today you will be in paradise. Now it's interesting because I think James is the one that they called the Christ, but there are 2 James. And the one that wanted to call down fire from heaven was James the Lesser. So that makes sense that they ended up killed with him, and I think that's what happened. Luke 23:19 is the one I got this stuff about the desecration on, and I didn't get exactly the same thing they did when I analyzed it. I got who was present through or by the means of sedition, someone, and that's a definite. I looked this up under the etymology, the ancient etymology, and it says someone um, had made in the city, and murder and the murderer desecrated in the prison. So it was like he was desecrated, is the way I'm reading that. And desecration is like the act of treating someone sacred or solemn in a sacrilegious way or disrespectful way, and it could actually even mean rape. So that's pretty intense. But I just wanted to show that to you because when I throw it in the translators, I get desecrated also. So I'm pretty sure that's what it meant. And Luke in 23:23, the mechanical I got on this was he did not rest upon the numerous voices demanding that he be crucified and prevailed against those shouting, even the high priest. It was like Pilate made his own decision, is the way I'm reading this. When you look at this, he did not lie upon or rest upon their voices to make his decision. And Apokema, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, my pronunciations in Greek are horrible, so I haven't done a whole lot of that in this video just because I don't have anybody to converse with to actually, you know, get the vocals on it happen. I can recognize the words, but I can't vocalize it well. And I guess growing up in Mississippi, that even makes it worse. But here we have that negating particle again, and it's followed by a vowel, and this is an indicative verb. So I'm very sure this is translated correctly. He did not rest upon the voices, the numerous voices demanding that he be crucified. It's very interesting because this is not what we've been told. And you don't take my word for any of this. You take these verses, and this will be up here. You can go through these and see what you get. Go analyze them yourself, and come back. And you know, if you have comments or you find something different on this, let me know. You know, but right now it's looking like to me that Pilate did not kill Jesus Christ, and that's why we see him in Rome even way after the ascension, and that he killed Jesus Barabbas, and which was probably the real son. And I don't think he was a murderer either. Okay, this is just where I've color coded that verse so that you can actually see it, you know, where it falls, you know. And you can see on the verb, when you see that little V dash I and I at the end, that means it's indicative. But I also I pulled these off of, so you know the resource I'm using, I got these off of Abram Publishing, what the verb, what it falls as, whether it's indicative or subjective or whatever, you know. And I try to be very, I mean, I've looked and looked and looked at these things, trying to make sure that I'm not making a mistake. And I know Father knows my heart's in the right place. If I've made a mistake, I made one. And he knows I was only doing what I thought was the best. So I think this is very important to realize what possibly really happened. Okay, in verse 24, I absolutely got that Pilate did not give the sentence that it should be as they required. Okay, and this is a literal translation, so that could be polished up to sound a little better. But again, we're looking at the negating particle, then it's followed by a plosive consonant, and then the verb is an indicative verb. So it meets all three criterias. Okay, I just wanted to show on this one. I put an extra slide because I didn't have room on that other one. It's like even though this didn't come out translated exactly like the old ancient Greek did, it does show that that negating particle is showing up even in a translator. So it's not like I'm making this stuff up. It really is there, I think. And I think that it's just not been um, translated correctly. Okay, I pulled some of these verses to kind of see, um, you know, about the how often that negating particle is in there, and it was in quite a few of the text in the Greek. And then I looked at these that didn't even have it, and it's like this one says, and Pilate condemned their request, and he criticized their request. It's like it's still picking up on Pilate not agreeing with their request. And the DE was present about 50% of the time when I just kind of glanced at it. I didn't do an accurate count. I just glanced to see how many times it was in there. Verse 25 is also very important because what I got on this one was he did not release to them the one put in prison through insurrection and murder whom they asked for. He did not hand over the Jesus to the will of them. Now see, that's right there tells me that this probably is the other Jesus, because it's telling you who he didn't release. He did not release Barabbas according to this. Okay, and we look at this and we have a negating particle, we have an indicative verb, and it follows a vowel. So it meets all three criteria, you know. And then we can come down here and we look at this one, and it also, there's your negating particle followed by a vowel, and then the verb is indicative. So I just don't see how these could be read any other way. And here's all the vowels. I was just showing that. I try to give you as much information as I can. I hope it's not overwhelming. And the little lines are just to lead you to what rule it's actually following so you can read those. And then I tried to color code those on this side. Now, this verse is interesting because it says, as they took him away, they laid hold of Simon, the native of Cyrene, coming from the field, the cross on the back, the cross upon the back behind the Jesus. And I thought that was really strange. I'm not sure what this, because this means they laid hold of or seized him, um, overtook him even, and I'm not sure, or abducted. I'm not sure what this verse was about in Luke, because, you know, in John, it says that he was made to carry his own cross. But then Luke gives us the account that that the cross was laid on Simon. And I don't know if this was done for some kind of agenda. I know the Muslims think that Simon died in his place, but I don't think so. Okay, then we go on to John 18. And it started this at verse 28. Then they led Jesus from the house of Cleopas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters, so they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. And I think that differs from Luke and their account. Also, I think they were in there. So Pilate went outside to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" And they answered, "If this man were not doing evil, he would not have been delivered over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." The Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." And I don't understand why that statement, because in the Old Testament there's all kinds of laws where you're supposed to stone people to death. So I'm not sure on that. This was a fulfillment of the word that Jesus had spoken to show by what kind of death he was going to die. So Pilate entered the headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" And Pilate answered, "And am I a Jew? Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" Now, when I did a mechanical translation of this, I got Pilate answered, "I am Jewish. I am the nation, the son, and the chief priests. They delivered you to me on what you have done." And I had never known that was there had I not looked at the Greek. But I'll show you why I think it really says, "I am Jewish." In verse 36, Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from this world." Then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" And Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king." He's still not admitting that he's a king of anything. "For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I came into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" After he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him." So here we are again, still the same determination, no guilt. "But you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" And they cried out again, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber. Now when I looked at verse 40, it says they all cried out again, saying, "Not this one, but Barabbas." But he was not a robber. And I'll show you that verse also. I think this verse actually shows that Pilate is concerned because he is Jewish, and this charge involved the nation, which was the Jews. Okay, he answered, "The Pilate is what I got. Neither. I am Jewish." See, there's "I am Jewish." "To the nation, the your son and the chief priest, and they delivered you to me. What have you done?" And I also got this when I threw it in a translator, that he says, "I am Jewish. I am a son of the nation." He was literally saying that. So I think that is totally mistranslated. Okay, this is the one where I got that he's not a robber. And if you look at the verse 1840, you'll see there's the negating particle. followed by a vowel, and let me see where. There's the indicative verb right there. It follows all three. Was is an indicative verb. It's right down here. These might be kind of hard to see on a phone, but I did the best I could to show them. But you can look them up also on an interlineary, and it'll give you the same information. So we have John saying that Barabbas was not a robber. And here again, I threw it in. What I did, I changed. See, it's got an S on the end. And when you throw these Bible verses into these translators, they're going to spit out the King James Version every time because they recognize them and they've got it programmed that way. But if you change the name slightly, you'll get a more accurate what is really there. So what I did was just drop the S off the name so it's not picking up the King James Version and put it in that way, and I get the same thing. Barabbas was not a robber. Barabbas was not a robber. This one is Google Star, and this one is Google Translate. Okay, now we need to look if Barabbas was the real son, who was Jesus the Christ? That was my next question. So I'm going to try to answer that the way I think who might have been, or possibly, or probably was. Who did Pilate's wife warn Pilate not to have anything to do with? That's pretty interesting because in Matthew 27:19, when he was set down on the judgment seat, his wife sent him, saying, "Have nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him." Well, who do we have in the text called the just? We have Jesus, a friend of Paul, who was named the Just. Then we have, it's also a surname of Joseph Barsabbas, okay? And there's also a Titus, a Christian in Corinth, with whom Paul lodged. Okay, so we got, and when you get to looking at James, you'll find out that Joseph Barsabbas is probably James also. Eusebius records, now he's one of the church fathers, that Clement of Alexandria related that James, whom the people of old called the Just because of his outstanding virtue, as the record tells us, to be elected as an episcopal throne of Jerusalem. Other epitaphs are James the brother of the Lord, James the Just, and James the Righteous. And then we had Josephus saying, at least has not hesitated to testify to his writings, where he's saying, these things happened to the Jews to avenge James the Just, who is the brother of Jesus, that is called Christ. For the Jews slew him, although he was a most just man. So we keep getting that word just. I think it's important to know that the Greek word adeptos for brother is used, but not always in a blood relation sense. It can also be like a brotherhood or the brothers of the church, that kind of thing. And this is just to give you some more context to Josephus' statement and to give you the resources to read these things, is why I included this slide. And we can look at James the Just, or James the brother of the Lord, is actually the Greek for Jacob. And we know from the Old Testament that Jacob means the supplanter or the heel holder. And we also have Origen backing up that James is called the Christ. And these writings have caused some controversy. This is in the Ananicete Fathers, Volume 9 writings, and he calls him James, the brother of Jesus, who is called Christ. So they were literally calling James Christ. And this is just the Josephus clip again. Okay, I went over part of this. James is the English variant of the name Jacob. Jacob meaning is Yahweh, or the heel holder or supplanter. It's a biblical name. It's derived from the elements of Yahweh and the name of God. Akab meaning heel, or Akab to supplant or to cheat. The name Jacob is from Yaakov, the Hebrew, and Yaqabel, Hebrew. The usual English form of James shares the root and is formed by the Latin. This was the twin sons of Isaac and Rebekah, who were born holding on the heel of the elder Esau, and got approval of Jacob, even though he tricked his brother Esau. And most people, when I hear these videos about Esau, I get so disturbed, because it's like, when you read it in Hebrew, it says he was near death. He wasn't just hungry. He was about to die when Jacob got him to sign over his birthright. I want to talk a little bit about Acts too. This is strange, because in Act 12:2, we have that James is killed, and he killed James, the brother of John, and they added with the sword, they added the with thee. Okay, so I went through and analyzed this, and this actually is a negating particle here, and it says he did not kill him. It could mean he took him away, I don't know. Occasionally this is used for emphasis also, and not a not, but it's like, I don't know if he's talking about his brother John, the sword, because that's the sword. It's actually a makara is a type of ancient Greek blade weapon. I don't know if he took away the weapon. I don't know. I mean, when you get down here to Acts 12:17, then we have Peter telling, tell these things to James, like he's not dead. So did he really die in verse 1 or not? And then in chapter 15, and after they had held their peace, James answered, men and brethren, hearken unto me. So also I found here, James the Just, from the early date of Peter, the leader of the church, the time Peter left Jerusalem after Herod Agrippa's attempt to kill him. So other places have it as an attempt to kill him, not actually a killing. But I thought that was really strange, because Paul even mentions meeting with James later on in his books. So he obviously did not die that soon. I told y'all I'm a novice on this stuff, but I'm going to show y'all something here that just really bothers me. Okay, this is James 1:1. Okay, I don't think this is translated correctly at all. And I'm going to show you how the wording exactly matches 1 Timothy 5:21, which is totally translated differently. Okay, what I got on this is Divine James and also Master Lord Jesus Christ, servant to the 12 tribes that are in Diaspora, greetings. Okay, what they've done is they moved things around, like you've got servant here, and they pushed it up here behind James's name. They moved it over here. And then they added of thee to this, and they're saying it's because of the dative case of Jesus Christ here, that OU on the end of those words. Okay, that can't be, because I'll show you here in just a second, because right here you've got a dative case of OU, and it says the Lord Jesus Christ, not of the of thee. And they're saying the of thee comes in because of that. It's just really strange what they're doing. Okay, now I'm going to show you these verses side by side. Okay, yeah, the blue highlighted here, that is the exact same phrase. Okay, and in James 1:1 they have of God, of the Lord Jesus Christ. And here it's God and Lord Jesus Christ. And see, servant, they've moved up here, and it should have been behind that, because he was servant to the 12 tribes that were scattered abroad. There was no reason to move servant up here. The only reason you would move it there is to make it like he's not claiming to be these things right here. I don't know if you get that or not, but it's like by moving servant, they made him servant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ instead of what he's actually claiming that he was. Because see, there's Jacob, and there's Theon, and Master or Lord Jesus Christ. He's claiming to be all those things. And this KAI you see right there can be and, even, or also. And I think this was done on purpose. It's also done in Jude. I'll show you that also. And Theon, Theon can mean a god. It can mean any god, really. It's not the name of God, but usually it means godly or divine. Okay, here's Jude 1:1. Okay, I'm doing a translator, and you get Judas, Jesus Christ, the slave brother, and James in God's Father's leadership. That's kind of bizarre. But when I look at it here, it's like you get Judas, Jesus, Christ, servant brother, also James, to the one God the Father, having been sanctified, and Jesus Christo, observed and called. Quite a bit of difference. That's probably why Paul was calling James, or the just one, Jesus. Because I think the text actually literally says he is Jesus. You can study that out, but it's pretty upsetting when you see it, because this would be my mechanical translation. Judas, Jesus Christ, servant brother, also James, to the one God Father, having been sanctified and observed, called Jesus Christo. This statement literally says he's called Jesus Christ. And there's also something peculiar after the fact in the resurrection. It's like John 20. We have to wonder why they didn't recognize Jesus after he rose from the dead. It's like, but Mary stood weeping outside the tomb, and as she wept, she stooped to look at the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. And they said to her, Woman, why are you weeping? She said to them, They have taken my Lord, and I do not know where they have lain him. Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Why would she not know it was Jesus? Is it because it's a different Jesus? Is it because they beat his face up? I'm not sure. Jesus said to her, Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you weeping? Supposing him to be the gardener. See, she didn't even know. She said to him, Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned and said to him in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. Jesus said to her, Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to the brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, I have seen the Lord, and that he has said these things to her. And this is interesting because now we know who this was. It was Mary Magdalene. And the Rabboni is actually would be a Jewish rabbi. And we know that he did not claim to be Jewish. Now we're told there are 5 important James figures in Scripture. The James in the New Testament, the ones of Zebedee, Aphus, the brother of the Lord, the James the son of Mary, brother of Joseph or Jose, and James the brother of Jude. We're going to look at those things. Okay, we're told that James, the son of Alphaeus, in Matthew 10:3, Mark 3:18, Luke 6:15, and Acts 1:13. Is that true? What is Apis? It means, it can mean whitish, and it was a river and a river god. And are Apis and Cleophas the same thing? Catholic and Orthodox traditions hold that Cleophas is believed to be the brother saint of Saint Joseph and the same person as Cleophas. It's really, really strange. The actual definition that I got from Abram Publishing and from the Thayers is that Apis means changing. And the Cleophas, which is the Hebrew equivalent, means exchange. So it's actually, and there were coins all the way back to like 485 BC of this character. And when you look at like the text here, you'll notice that these are paler when you're looking at interlineary, and some of them are in parentheses. That's because these words are not actually there. The son of is not there in the text. And this is interesting too. I'll put this in here because was he really the brother of the Lord? That's one we need to address right here. Okay, this is John 19:26, and it says, Jesus then seeing the mother and the disciple near the being beloved, said the stepmother, his mother, behold, thy son, your son. And it's like when you look at this, you're going, what? Stepmother. Okay, look at mother right there. It's a Metri. Okay, then go look at this mother. It's spelled differently. Okay, I've threw these in like 4 different translators, and for this one, I get stepmother. He literally calls Mary his stepmother. He did not call her mother from the cross. Here's another one up here. I put all 4 of them on here, so you could see that. This is Microsoft, Bladu. I think this is Google, and I can't remember what this one is. But I put them all on here so you could see that it literally means stepmother. I was blown out of the water. I've never studied Greek before, and I'm sorry I'm a novice, but I'm seeing major problems with this stuff. It's like they've tried to hide things, I think. And y'all may be mad at me when this video's over, but I'm listening to Father in my gut, and it tells me that I think that we had 2 different Jesuses, and I think that Barabbas, which means son of the Father, was the real one, and I think he really died for us. And this struck me. In Luke 9:46, an argument arose among them as to which would be the greatest. But Jesus, knowing the reasoning of their hearts, took a child and put him in his side. Whoever receives this child in my name receives me. Whoever receives me receives him who sent me. For who is lesser among you is the one who is greater. Okay? It's just really strange that he said there that, and actually when you look at it's the lesser among you all, the same shall be the greater. And we know that in Mark 15:40, and yeah, I know I'm analyzing a lot of these verses, but the reason I'm doing that is because now that I'm seeing problems, I want to make sure what I'm reading is actually what I'm reading. But he says that Maria of James the Lesser was looking on at this is at the cross. And this caught my attention because there is a lesser and a greater James, I think. According to tradition, there is also. Okay, when we look at this word, ephaso, it means changing or exchange. You could literally read these because they inserted son of. It's like Matthew 3:10-3 could read James, his exchange of the cross, because it means to exchange even to the cross. So I'm wondering if this wasn't put in there to let us know that this was the exchange that was going to take place. I know that sounds funny, but you can read through all these verses, and each one I put in light, the sun, where it was like, that's the way they have it. When you look at the strong numbers, you'll see that this one is lightened out and usually in parentheses, or else it's made a pale gray. I did that on these cards just so you could see how many times they're inserting sun. That just really, it's like in this word meaning exchange of the cross. I mean, it means belonging to the river, which means bringing or yielding, fetching a price. That's unusual too, because, they sold him out for 30 pieces of silver. It's almost like this was intentionally put in there so we would know something about James. Then you got to look at the word James. What does James mean? Supplanter? The supplanter that exchanges the cross. I mean, you could literally say that. Now here's a verse that kind of like really shows what I'm talking about, and I color coded it so you could see. Okay, it's like Zebedee. That means gift of Yah, or Yah has given. So James would have been Yah's gift, not Father in heaven's gift. And you have to watch my video on who's the real Father to understand why I say that. And this word here is actually the his. So it would be thy his gift of Yah. And James would be supplanter. And names are important in the text, and there's a reason why almost like Thayer's and Brown Driver Briggs, all those give you a etymology of what that name means because it's their reputation. So James the supplanter, thy his son, or thy Yah's gift, or Yah has given. And it even says their father mending the nets, and he called them. It's like there's a lot more being said in these when you get into the deeper meanings of these words. Out of all these verses, I think I only found 2 that literally had sons in them. There was Matthew 27:56 and Matthew 26:37, and it had 2 sons, and this one had sons. Most of these were inserted or just assumed or something. They put them into the sentence, which I thought was strange. But I'm not going to read every one of these verses because I think we're already at we're at 2 hours and 44 minutes. But you can go through and read these and look at them. I mean, everywhere I've graded out, they were grayed out in the KJV Strong's Index verses. Okay, this is where we got James being called Justus. We've got him being called Barsabbas, Jesus Christ, Jesus. It's like when we get to Acts 1:21. So one of the men who have accompanied you during the time of the Lord Jesus went out among us, beginning with the baptism of John until the day when he was taken up. One of these men must become with us a witness to his resurrection. And they appointed 2, Joseph, called Barsabbas, who was also surnamed Justus. There goes the Justus word again. And Matthias, and he departed thence and entered into a certain man's house named Justus, one who worshipped God, whose house adjoined hard to the synagogue. So this probably was James the Just, because he was a high priest for the temple. And Jesus, which is called Justus, that's in Colossians 4:11, who are of the circumcision, these are my fellow workers under the kingdom of God, which have been a comfort to me. And that's Paul telling us that Jesus is also called Justus. And then in Acts 15:22, then pleased it the apostles and elders with the whole church to send chosen men of their own company to Antioch with Paul, and Barnabas, Judas surnamed Barsabbas, and Silas, the chief men among the brethren. So we've got all these names swimming around James the Just name. We have Paul calling Jesus Justus, or the Just, in the Colossians 4:11. And we also know that Yahweh calls Israel his firstborn son. Okay, well, Israel used to be Jacob, he renamed him, and Jacob also means James. It's not a coincidence. Okay, in Luke 1, starting in verse 12, and then Zacharias saw him, he was troubled, and fear fell upon him. But the angel said unto him, Fear not, Zacharias, for thy prayer is heard, and thy wife Elizabeth shall bear thee a son, and thou shalt call his name John. And thou shalt have joy and gladness, and many shall rejoice at his birth. He shall be great in the sight of the Lord, and drink neither wine nor strong drink, and he shall be filled with the Holy Spirit even from his mother's womb. And many of the children of Israel shall he turn to the Lord their God. And he shall go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just. There we go again, James the Just. To make ready a people prepared for the Lord. And I think it was pretty intentional that this was written the way it's written. And see, I put here, it's like Thayer's definition is James, the supplanter. It's the same as Jacob, the supplanter. And it's actually, this is the English version of the Hebrew version. This side will probably flip you out a little bit, but just try to hold on to your faith in the real Son, because I think all this was done by Paul, because we have like him calling Jesus the just, and then in Acts 7:52 we have, which of the prophets have not your fathers persecuted? They have slain them which slew before the coming of the just one. So they were already calling, I think, James as Jesus at this point. Okay, but when you get to 1 Corinthians 15:7, when I analyzed that pretty much freaked me out a little bit, because it was like, it literally has James appearing to all the apostles, because this is reversed, kind of like Spanish. It's like, then James appeared after that to all the apostles. And that's probably why Josephus was calling James, the brother of Jesus, as Christ. Because he said right before the brother of Jesus, who was called the Christ, whose name was James. It's like, let's just go figure. Okay, looking at this verse here, it's like where they're saying, is this not the carpenter's son? Is this not Mary? Is his mother not called Mary? Is his brethren James and Jose and Simon and Judas? I don't think that it was. They take this as a statement of fact that he was. But this is them questioning who he is. This does not tell you that he is brother with all these people, and that Mary is his mother. It's like, and what I'm doing is covering all those points of what they say, you know, like the brother of, James was the brother of, and all this. This doesn't tell you that James was the brother of the Lord. This just tells you that they were questioning whether he was. This is Paul's account in 1 Corinthians 15 in context. Now I would remind you, brothers, of the gospel I preached to you, which you received, in which you stand, and by which you are being saved, if you hold fast to the word I preached to you. He always puts that in there, unless you believe in vain. For I delivered to you of first importance what what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that he was buried and raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas and then to the 12. He appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of them who are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. And if you correct that verse, then he appeared to James, then the verse they have, it says then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. But when I looked at it, it literally says James appeared after that to all the apostles. Last of all, as to the one untimely born, he appeared to me. For I am the least of the apostles, unworthy to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace toward me is not in vain. On the contrary, I worked harder than any of them, though it was not I, but the grace of God that is in me. Whether then it was I or they, we preached to you, so you believed. So he's like, Paul is jumping on this bandwagon, and this may be why the numbers don't line up. When you look at the other accounts of who he appeared to, it's because there are two separate things there, because we got 500 here, and then we got the other text that says that I think he appeared only to those that the apostles, or only to a certain group, and then all of a sudden we've got tons of people he's appearing to. Then we have James, like in Acts 12:17, after Peter has miraculously escaped from prison and must flee Jerusalem due to Herod Agrippa's persecution, he asked James to be informed. And James pretty much took control of the Council of Jerusalem in Acts 15. He starts telling them what to do and setting up all the rules and everything. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Y'all can go through and read that. James is presented as a principal author of the apostolic degree also in Acts 15. And after there's one more mention of James in Acts meeting with Paul shortly before Paul's arrest. And when we were come to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. And the day following, Paul went in with us unto James, and the elders were present. It's like he started acting as the high priest for all the Jews and the early church, and everything started shifting to more of a Jewish thing, and Jesus being the Christ. That, I think this is when that happened, is because he said many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they'll lead many astray. I think this is when it was set up. And I think this is kind of ironic, too. It's like James could be Jacob, changed to Israel, and it's like his name was changed. Israel means the man that strived with God and prevailed. And it's like they strove with Jesus and they prevailed. They took over. It's kind of ironic that it follows the Genesis 32 thing. Have seen God face to face, and yet a life has been delivered. Because, Isaiah tells us that really the text is the beginning from the end of things not yet done. So we can look back and see that things are happening, and they weren't done yet, but they were going to happen. They're prophecies. Okay, and it's like right now we're sitting on the flood, because in modern Hebrew, Nephilim is actually the aborting ones, or the abortionist. And it's like they're mixing and mingling these cells in the medicines they're given right now. And So everybody's blood is getting mixed up with aborted fetus cells. And it's like, so we're sitting at the point of the flood at this point, to me. And that's my take on it. There's a lot of interesting things when you take that Hebrew text and throw it into modern Hebrew. I think it's almost like an algorithm. The entire Old Testament is some kind of magic book algorithm that says what's going to happen in the future. And there's all kinds of futuristic stuff, like Adam was also the first computer. It sold for $666. And it talks about the tubers and the atropher inside the computer, how it works with the monitor and all in the Hebrew text. When you throw it in modern Hebrew, it's really scary. One of these days I'll have to do y'all a video on how the modern text shapes up in the Old Testament. It's weird. And I don't know if people realize it, but when you go from Luke 9:53 through 56 into Luke 10, they broke it up and they put these little subheadings and stuff, and it kind of breaks your attention. Or if you're reading chapter by chapter every day, you don't pick up on what exactly is happening. Like in Mark 3:17, James, the son of Zebedee, or Yah's gift, and his brother John, the brother of James, he gave them the name Morganes, or which means sons of thunder. Well, that's very indicative of a lot of other things by calling them sons of thunder. Well, when you look at the Luke 9, and they received him not, because his face was not going to Jerusalem. And when the disciples James and John had seen this, they said, Lord, will you want us to command fire down from heaven and consume them? And turning, he rebuked them. And you know not what spirit you are. It's like, no, we don't do that. And he said, the Son of Man came not to destroy souls, but to save. And they went to another town, and they left Christ. And when he was talking about it, they left him. I shouldn't even use that word anymore, Christ, I'm sorry. And then he says in 62, no one having put their hand to the plow and then turning back is fit for for God's kingdom. Okay, well, most people clip off there. They read one chapter and they put the Bible down, put it to the side. I read my chapter, and studied it out. Well, another day they might pick up and read Luke 10. They don't follow the train of thought. Okay, after all this happens, he turns around and said, after this the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them on ahead of him, 2 by 2, into every place, every town and every place where he himself was about to go. In other words, when he rebukes. They're gone. And he started over. And that's missed because people don't read in context. And I think that that's what happened. They started their own thing. Now, the thing about the two on the cross drinking the same cup would assume that that would be those two, James and John, and that they died with him. But then when we get to looking at tradition, according to tradition, St. James traveled from Jerusalem to Spain in obedience to Jesus' command to make disciples of all the nations. After a short time, he returned to Jerusalem in 44 A.D., where he was beheaded by Herod Agrippa to please the Jewish leaders. The historian Eusebius states that Clement of Alexandria shared an eyewitness account of St. James, the accuser, being so moved by his final confession of faith that he converted and was killed at the same time as James. What previously was bold declaration for James became a reality. Instead of calling down fire upon Herod Agrippa, the son of thunder, gave up his life. So apparently he was still running around calling fire from heaven. And that's Yahweh's signature, to call down, think about Elijah and Moses. That's Yahweh's signature when you're seeing fire. And Jesus said that's not from the right spirit. And I read y'all this earlier. See, this conflicts with that other story because this was the death of James in church history. And this was by the historian Eusebius in about 260, somewhere in there, CE. And he had said, why do you ask me concerning Jesus, the Son of Man? He himself sits in heaven at the right hand of the power and is about to come upon the clouds of heaven. And but this is James the Just. So I'm not sure if there were two or not. I mean, it's very confusing when you start reading the histories. But I just wanted to remind y'all I read this, and you may want to reread through it and then reread that other slide again. And like my video about the Father, I put this on here too. It's like in Job 1:16, while we were still speaking, also another came. The fire of Elohim fell from the heavens and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. And I alone have escaped to inform you. And then in 2 Kings 1:12, Elijah answered them, if I am a man of Elohim, let fire come down from heavens and consume you and the 50 men. And a fire of Elohim came down from the heavens and consumed him. Then we have Genesis 19:23. The sun had risen on the earth when Lot entered to Zoar, and Yahuwah rained sulfur and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from Yahweh out of the heavens. So he overthrew those cities and all the plain and the inhabitants of the city, and what grew on the ground. Okay, well, we know that Yahweh is also Yehovah. It's the same name. And he was the king of the gods and the god of the sky and the thunder in Rome. So when he called him sons of thunder, he's talking about sons of Yahweh. It's interesting also that James the Just is shown on a white horse, and his remains are in Spain at Santiago de Compostela, and it's also in Jeremiah, I think, because it said, a bow and a knife they are holding, they are audacious in no way shall they show mercy. Their voice is as the sea shall sound upon the horses they shall ride, being prepared as fire for the war against you, O daughter of Babylon. And this right here is actually the just. The just shall ride. And in Genesis 49:16, I see this going back to that too. Let Dan be a serpent in the way, besetting the path, biting the heels of the horses, and the rider shall fall backwards. Interesting enough, James himself says in James 3:3, if we put the bits in the mouths of the horses so they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. And I think this may go back to Revelation even 19:21. The rest were slain by the sword of him that sitteth upon the horse, which proceeded out of the mouth, and all the birds were filled from their flesh. And this may also go back to James. I went to the Greek text and checked the Jeremiah verses to see if this actually was the just, and it was. It's Justus, the same as the name of the Christian Justus in Jeremiah 8:16. It says, "We shall hear the neighing of the swift horses out of Dan. The whole land quaked at the sound of the neighing of Justus' horses. And he shall come and devour the land and the fullness of it, the city and them that dwell in it." So, but this is from the Polyglot. I just wanted to check the Greek text and see if it matched the Hebrew text. I also checked this name again in Jude 1:1, and it's the exact spelling and everything as the one in John 1:17, where it says, "For the law was given by Moses, grace and truth came by Jesus Christ." So it's the same. So that's not of Jesus Christ. It's just Jesus Christ. Because I'm double checking some of this stuff, because it's like I told you, I'm new to the Greek and all, but I think that this is really strange the way they worded this. And I also noted that James's name is not found in the Gospel of John at all, which I thought was odd too. Looking at Luke 6:16, where he's listing the apostles and stuff, it's like I noticed in the mechanical too. When you see Chi, it can also mean and, also, even, or indeed. So where it says Judas James and Judas Iscariot, who also became a traitor, a betrayer, then this could also, this could be like giving him two different names, because Iscariot can mean like the cut off one. It can mean a person from Iscariot, from Karat. And then when I checked the Roman history, this word Iscariot is also a chariot driver. So it can mean a chariot driver. But, he said in John 10:10, he said, "The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy, and I have come that you might have life and have it to the full." And then we see in John 12:4-6, when Judas the Iscariot, one of the disciples and one who would betray him, why was the oil not sold for 300 days' wages and given to the poor? He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, and he held the money bag and used to steal the contributions. So he could have possibly even been the thief. And James the Just definitely had to be a high priest, because in describing his lifestyle, St. Jerome in Diveris Istribus, he says that he quotes Hegesippus' account of James from the 5th book, and he says, "After the apostles, James, the brother of the Lord, surnamed the Just, was made the head of the church of Jerusalem. Many indeed are called James. This one was holy from the mother's womb. He drank neither wine nor strong drink, ate no flesh, never shaved, anointed himself with oil or bathed, he alone had privilege of entering the Holy of Holies, since indeed he did not use any woolen vestments but linen, and went alone into the temple and prayed on behalf of the people, insomuch as his knees were reputed to have acquired the hardness of camels' knees. And since it's unlawful for anybody but the high priest to be in the temple to enter the Holy of Holies, only on once a year on Yom Kippur, this quotation is really, it just basically says that he was a high priest. And in John 18:15, it said that Simon Peter followed Jesus. So did another disciple, and this is when they arrested him. Since that disciple was known as a high priest, he entered with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. So this had to be James the Just that was doing that. And I bet you they took the robe off of him and put it on Barabbas and paraded him around. Because James the Just, if he went in the Holy of Holies, would have had the purple robe. Like I told you, names are no coincidence. They are definitely have a lot of meaning. Okay, like the name Barsabbas, I told you is also Justice, the just. Joseph called Barsabbas. Okay, Barsabbas means the man of the host. Now, what happened at the last supper? It's always bothered me about the blood and the flesh eating stuff. It's like in John 13:27 it said, "Then after he had taken the morsel, Satan entered him." Jesus said to him, "What you are doing, do quickly." It's like, who handed him the morsel? Supposedly it was Jesus Christ, or was it James the Just that handed him the morsel? Because he said, "I come in my Father's name. You do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, you'll receive him." And when we look at these verses, it's like, then Satan entered into Judas, called Iscariot, being one of the number of the 12. So it was one of the apostles even. And this just is all, and then we have in Luke 6:16, and Judas, and the verse has the son of Judas, but the son of is not there. It's just, and Judas James, and Judas Iscariot, who became the traitor. And it's just, there's just too many coincidences in there. I think Paul was teaching the James the Just Jesus Christ, and since Jesus told us that would be the main deception, that's where this came from. I think this also connects us to Daniel 8, because in it says, "And unto the prince of the host it exerts itself and is taken away, hath been the continual and thrown down to the base of the sanctuary, and a sin offering was given for the sacrifice, and the righteous," or the just, "was cast down on the ground and practiced and prospered." Okay, so there we go again with the host thing. And you remember that Jesus told us, he said, "So if they say, 'Look, he is in the wilderness,' do not go out. And if they say, 'Look, he's in the inner rooms,' do not believe it. For as lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will be." And see, Paul used that same word for corpse, which is soma, in his verse, that "for as the body is one, hath all the members, and all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ." And he said, "Well, don't call me Christ." Then why is Paul calling Jesus Christ? It all fits. Okay, another thing to think about this, Barsabbas also means one of the drunks, but it means son of the oath. And he said not to swear any oaths. And it's like, remember when I talked to y'all about Acts 19:13 through 15? They were forcing them to take an oath by the Jesus whom Paul was teaching. So I think this all plays together. And I think this whole deception thing and the calling on Jesus Christ instead of Jesus Barabbas, the Son of the Father, came about through Paul. And I think that is the major deception that we need to know. And I think that Jesus Barabbas, which means the Son of the Father, and I can't say that enough because that is important. Names are important. I think that that is the revealing of the real Son of Man. And if I'm correct, that means that we're right at the very, very end. Because that was another one of his warnings, that it'll be like Sodom and Gomorrah when the Son of Man is revealed. This is another comparison that I wanted to show you too with the Jude 1:1, because I don't want y'all to think I'm making up stuff, okay? See the spelling on these words for Jesus? They're exactly the same, all right? When you look at Matthew 8:5, there is no of there for this OU on the end of his name. Means there shouldn't be an of here either. I think this was something they made up to cover up things because this one reads, and when Jesus was entered, it's like, where's the of here? There is none. I just wanted to let y'all know that because I did compare things back and forth between other scriptures to see if I'm correct that they inserted these words on purpose. Now see, look up here. You've got of before Jesus. You've got the servant. You got an and thrown in there. It's like they just threw stuff in to make it fit what they wanted it to say. Okay, if we connect the dots between Matthew, Zechariah, and James, chapter 5, we can kind of see what happened here, okay? James actually tells on them what really happened. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming to you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasures for the last days. Behold, the wages and laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you, and the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened the hearts of the day of slaughter. You condemned and murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you. Okay, he's admitting that they killed the one that was righteous, but he's also admitting all the wrong that was done in all of this. And when we look at Zechariah, he said, in 1 month I destroyed 3 shepherds. I became impatient with them, and they detested me. Then the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, that lowly price I was valued by them. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them to the house of the Lord to the potter. Then one of the and then in 13:7 it says, awake, O sword, against the shepherd, against the man who stands next to me, declares the Lord of hosts. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. Okay. Well, when we look at this, it's like this was Judas James, who was called Judas James Jesus Christ, Yahweh's servant. And what is happening here is the money is being thrown to the potter. If you look at Matthew 27:3, then when Judas the betrayer saw that Jesus was condemned, he changed his mind and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders. Because he realized what was happening, that the real Jesus was being condemned. I have sinned in betraying innocent blood. What is that to us? See to it yourself, they said. And throwing down the pieces of silver into the temple, he departed, and he went and hanged himself. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, "It's not lawful for us to put the money in the treasury, since it is blood money." So they took counsel and bought with them the potter's field as a burial place for strangers. Therefore that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then it was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah, saying, they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him who, I can't read, I'm sorry, it's probably because this has gone on so long, we're 3.5 hours. And they took the 30 pieces of silver, and the price of him on whom a price had been set by some of the sons of Israel. Okay, again, this goes back to the sons of, who's Israel? Jacob. Jacob is also James. And they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord directed me. So all this is going back and to the same prophecies. And this had nothing to do with the real Jesus, who was the Son of the Father or Son of Abba. Pretty amazing. And if you don't see this exactly the same way I do, that's okay. But I feel real confident in what I'm showing you. Now, what do we do now that we know this? We go home to Father. We're the prodigal children, and we go home to Father, and He's happy we're back home. Luke 15:20. And he rose and came to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, and he felt compassion for him, and he ran and embraced him and he kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to the servant, Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He is lost and he is found. And they began to celebrate. It is fitting to celebrate and be glad. Your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and he is found. Our brother, our friend, Jesus was lost. We found him, and we were lost, and we've been found, and we all go back to Father. That's where we belong. I love you guys so much, and I hope this does not cause anybody to lose faith. I hope it gives them more faith. It should. It should give you more faith, not cause you to lose faith. That's it. I hope you enjoyed it.